大部分人想到 sales 都会想到业务，但其实仔细想想，就算你不是业务，你每天至少都在卖一个想法，给同事、上司、客户，甚至给家人。And that is called persuasion, 也就是说服力。So in today's episode, let's learn one of the tools you can use to persuade more effectively. Hello, 欢迎来到 Executive Plus 主管双语沟通力的 podcast。我们希望带给大家最实用的沟通工具，包括了成功人士对全球市场的分享、职场英语的技能、跨文化沟通技巧与其他能帮助您成为出色领导者的工具。Hi, I'm Sherry, founder of Executive Plus. As a language trainer and certified coach, I've trained hundreds of managers from Fortune 500 companies such as Dior, Google, Deloitte, and Yahoo.And
I'm Nick, Director of Communication Strategy at Presentality.I've helped startups raise millions of US dollars in funding and train the executives of publicly listed companies to present on the global stage.
Welcome to the Executive Plus podcast,
where you can take your communication and language skills from good to great. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Executive Plus podcast.Over the next few weeks, we're going to take you through the deep, dark secrets and tricks of the trade of persuasion. In part one of our four-part series, we're going to look at knowing your opponent.
没错，其实在我们在这2-3个礼拜以来，我们做了非常多的 research， 看了一些书籍啊，还有不同的一些 information， 然后或者是 master class or speech， 然后我们结合了，我们整理出来4种不同的主题，还有非常多很有用的一些工具，帮助你在于去增强你的说服力，也就是 persuasion。那当然 persuasion 你不只是用在 negotiation 上面谈判，不管是 business 的谈判，或者跟你的 teenage daughter 的谈判或者是你用在平常的 discussion， 用在 meeting 其实都非常的适用。
So, in the part one, we want to look at what it means to know your opponent. And we're actually going to take a look at 3 quote-unquote masters of persuasion, Bob Iger, Danial Pink, and Chris Voss, and what they have to say about the importance of understanding the other side, and that most of your persuasion, or the opening of your persuasion, is doing just that. It's not about convincing the other person that you have the right idea or that you're, super smart and they should listen to you, but it's actually about understanding what the other side is thinking, how they operate, and how you can get to know them better.
所以在这个单元，我觉得应该把这个单元取名成为化敌为友，也就是 know your opponents。也就是呢，所有的 master 他们都会强调的一点就是你必须要非常了解你的opponent by asking a lot of questions. So we'll get to that later. So 我们在这个 masterclass 我们结合了 Bob Iger, Danial Pink and Chris Voss， 那他们都有3个非常不同的背景。那我觉得这也是为什么我们想要把这3个人把他们的想法把他们的 sharing 所有结合在这边，因为让大家了解不管在什么样的情况我们都可以用到这个很有用的工具。
Right. So the first person that we're going to take a look at is Bob Iger.Recently, his memoir, The Ride of a Lifetime, was a New York Times bestseller, and he also came out with a masterclass where he talks a lot about his thought process when it comes to business. In one key chapter, he covers his thoughts on negotiation and the way that he was able to take 3 giant brands in of themselves, Pixar, while under the supervision of Steve Jobs,the Marvel comic franchise, and also Lucasfilms, the Star Wars world franchise as well.
所以 Bob Iger 那他是觉得说在他这些所有非常庞大的 acquisition 当中，他自己觉得说对他来讲最好的方式就是 expedient， 他喜欢所有的 process 都比较快一点能够达到共识，快一点能够结束。
Right. And the way that he does this is actually considered counterintuitive for most high-level business negotiation techniques, where Bob Iger says you don't have a poker face, you don't hold back all the information, but in fact, you just put all your cards on the table. You let everyone know exactly what you want from it, how you're going to benefit, so that they have a clear picture of why you're there.
So in addition to trying to be very expedient and laid out all the information, he also tried really hard to form that personal relationship with the opponents. So for example, Pixar case, he really tries very hard to be friends with Steve Jobs first.
Bob Iger had formed his own personal relationship with Steve Jobs years earlier. And one of the major challenges of the Disney acquisition of Pixar is that the former CEO of Disney, Michael Eisner, and Steve Jobs had a terrible relationship. They publicly disliked each other. And so Bob Iger had to go around this sort of corporate versus corporate hatred and really talk to Steve almost as his friend. And he talks a lot about when working with Steve Jobs, back to that spirit of candor and expediences, he just outright said, this is what I want to do. This is what I need. And he felt privileged that Steve Jobs, known as a very hard businessman, did the same thing. And because they were both very honest with each other and upfront, it helped when figuring out the real problems of the merger, that the corporate culture didn't work. They were two completely different companies, and it took both of them just outright saying that and not going, oh, it's about money, or it's just that I don't know if our companies work, and being honest about that and having real discussions that allowed them to go forward.
所以其实 Bob Iger 他所认为这个就算是 business negotiation， 他也觉得这是一个 collaborative effort， 他这个是大家要合作，一起合作才能达到共识的。所以他当初非常的诚实，跟 Steve Jobs 讲说，其实 Disney 真的很需要你。那他觉得说他已经不太在，他不把他的 ego 当成这个中心点。He really set aside his ego, and Steve Jobs really liked that about him. So that's why they struck a very nice deal, and now Disney definitely benefited from that deal.
So Bob Iger's philosophy was a lot about just making sure both sides are completely honest and open, even if you think it's controversial. But in many cases, that takes both sides. Danial Pink and Chris Voss start to look at the conversation of how do you get to know the other side if they're not just showing up open and candid and ready to go. And with Danial Pink, he's looking a lot at how to help people get to their own reasons and motivation.
所以你开始会看到我们会开始介绍给大家一些不同的工具，该怎么样去 open up 这个 conversation。 那 Danial Pink 在这 masterclass 他有讲到说，当你想要去控制一个 situation， 比如说就像你想象嘛，妈妈跟小孩子讲话说你不可以怎么样，你一定要怎么样， You know, you're trying to control that situation, you actually ended up irritating people. And that's just true. I think no matter how old you are.
Yeah, that's not just a business thing. That's just a person thing.
Yeah.
So, go tell your children, like, why don't you clean your room? You're not going to get oh, yeah, you're right. You're going to get an argument.
Yeah, exactly.
Or why aren't you doing this? Same with your significant other, your spouse, or your boyfriend and girlfriend. You're like, why don't you do this? That will immediately start a fight.
Exactly. 或者在公司你对你的下属 you want them to work on a project, but instead you're telling them, why don't you do this faster? Why can't you get this done better? You're going to irritate them. Yeah. So he's saying that if you irritate someone, you're leading with your mouth. So instead, you should be leading with your ears, which is to agitate people. Yeah.
Now, agitate is usually comes across a little bit
negative.
negative, but the way that Danial Pink is phrasing it, agitate is back to the more original definition, which means to mix something up.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah. So you're starting to get them to mix up their thoughts or rethink what their feelings and thoughts are, as opposed to irritate, which just annoy them.
所以简单来讲，如果用中文来翻的话 irritate 就是激怒人家嘛，那如果你要 agitate 人家，你就去煽动人家 kind of like getting something started, right? To stir up something in them. Yeah. So he gave an example. You could ask some irrational questions.
By irrational questions, when you look at his lessons, he really likes to start to quantify people's feelings. So again, rather than ask a question like, why aren't you cleaning your room? He would try to figure out, it's like on a scale of 1 to 10, how do you feel about cleaning your room right now?
通常因为他常在跟他的儿子嘛，用这样子的方式。So maybe the son would go, well, I'm at a 2 right now.
And then his follow-up question would be like, okay, how do we get you from a 2 to like a 5?
And then at this time, his son maybe will be like, well, can I just get some help from you and mom, just help me out a little bit, tell me how to organize, in this way, you're actually getting more information from somebody else and knowing what they want.
Yeah, you're getting a deeper understanding, because if you're like, why don't you want to clean your room? Or you should just clean your room right now. You're not getting to know what they want. You're just demanding that they finish a task.
Exactly.
And so by creating, that very first question on a scale of 1 to 10, how ready are you to do this deal with me? Yeah. It's not, are you ready? Yes or no. And if they have questions in their head, of course the answer is no. But if you're on like a scale, then they can go, I'm about here. And then it starts to become that collaborative effort where it's like, okay, well, how do we get forward? What do you need from me to move from, 5 to 8?
Exactly. So this way, you're really getting a lot of questions from your opponents. So it becomes more of a collaborative effort. Yeah. All right. So we're going to get into Chris Voss's idea. So Chris Voss, for those of you who don't know him, 如果你不太确定他是谁，他是一个之前 FBI 的 Head of Negotiator, right? Yeah. 那后来他也用他的这种谈判的技巧，他也创立了一个叫 Black Swan Group, to teach business executives how to do business negotiation. 那他有一些蛮实用、蛮有趣的一些方式，那现在来分享给大家。
What makes Chris Voss's line of thinking quite special and different from a lot of your traditional negotiation books is he was a hostage negotiator. And his philosophy was always, you have to collaborate because you cannot get back half a hostage. You can't be like, I'll give you half the money you're asking for if you just send me back half a person. So his philosophy was always, it has to work out for both sides. The other side needs to be willing to give back or return the person alive and whole.
所以就算在这种人质hostage situation 或者在 business situation， 他都会觉得说，他真的是觉得说，你如果能够 engage the other side， 你让对方觉得这是他的决定，他有他的这个权利做这个 decision making process， 那这个 negotiation 就会非常的成功。
So there's a few techniques that he lays out that when you're learning about the motivations or what people really want, you need to ask questions in very specific ways so they don't feel threatened. They feel that you're genuinely listening to their concerns, but you're doing it in a way to uncover what he calls the black swan, like the true motivation or the true piece of information that changes everything.
所以接下来我们会介绍3种不同方法来问问题。那你会发现这些方法不是我们很多很 traditional 一些语言的老师会教的那种怎么样问问题，但其实这些问题都不难哦。It's really not hard at all. It's really using the other side sentences and creating your questions. Yeah. So the first one's called mirroring.
Mirroring is something that we all know. It's the game where children just like to mimic each other. Be like, I like purple. And then the other child be like, I like purple. Stop saying that. Stop saying that. But in this case with mirroring, it's not meant to irritate the other side, but it's actually to show that you're listening, and just this simple technique encourages people to start clarifying what's on their mind.
所以 mirroring 这种方式 mirroring 大家知道 mirror 就像镜子一样嘛，那它 mirroring 它就说当对方讲一个句子，你可以很简单的去利用它句子最后面的一个 phrase 或者是1到3个字，你把它 repeat， 而且你的 tone of voice 是要用比较 curious 的方式，比较好奇的那种语气去 repeat。 So, okay.For example, 他在这个课程里面他是讲到说他的一个 client 到一个 yoga retreat. So it's like a 3-day thing. You know, you go, you do yoga. And his clients is husband and wife. So they both went. 那他这个先生他就觉得说 OK, 他有个目标，就是他在这个 entire yoga retreat 这3天之中，他一定要都完全只用 mirroring 的方式去回答人家的问题。 So for example, he walk up to someone, you know, someone would be talking about, oh my god, this yoga retreat is so amazing, you know, the food is so healthy.
The food is so healthy?
Yeah, you know, the food, the preparation of the food, it just, you know, they put a lot of thought into that, so they put so much effort in preparing the food.
Effort into preparing the food?
Yeah, you know, the preparation, it's just, you know, they're incorporating a lot of, you know, 开始他就一直讲。那后来这个先生呢，他有所有的，因为大部分都是女人，所有女人都跑来跟他的老婆讲说 Oh my god, your husband is such a good listener. They love him. 然后这老婆觉得超烦的。
Yeah.
She's so annoyed by the husband. But he successfully established that actually, instead of talking, you become this like, instead of like talking incessantly, you're asking the right question. You gave people a chance to really talk, and you become a great listener.
Right. And this is different than someone who just like listens and go, yeah, okay, oh yeah, you're so right. But because he's mirroring and sounding curious, he's actually directing the conversation in a way, because he's selecting out the key things that he wants the person to elaborate on. Exactly. So this is a lot of the secret of mirroring, where you can start to direct a conversation in a way you get more information. Let's take a price negotiation, for example. A lot of times if people were just be like, you know, the price is too high, then the auto response would be, what do you mean the price is too high?
No, it's not
this
too
is the
high.
Best deal that we can give you. I already gave you a 20% discount. And you're not clarifying why the other person believes it's too high. So the process of mirroring would look something like this.
You know what? Your price is too high.
Price is too high?
Yeah, we didn't really make a lot of money this year, so we have very limited budget.
A limited budget.
Yeah, we don't have a lot to spend, as I said, and I really, you know, there's a lot of things that we're trying to accomplish with a very limited budget.
Other things that you're trying to accomplish?
所以大家可以知道说，就是像这样子，我们就是直接的去拿这个后面那几个字或重要的 phrasing， 然后做一个很 curious 的 tone of voice 去反问人家，去 mirror 人家，那反而你会让对方会 open up and talk more about what they want. 所以这个在不管是什么样的情况之下，其实都还蛮适合。而且我觉得有一点想加强，就是很多人在语言不是非常的 comfortable 的时候，你觉得在问问题的部分，尤其是在这个 negotiation 的状态，问问题会有点让你紧张。但是其实你的问题真的不用很特殊还怎么样，你只是很简单的去 mirror 人家，你也可以达到一样的效果，而且是更好的效果。
So after mirroring, another major technique that Chris Voss likes to use is what he calls labeling. And labeling is partly a clarification tool, but it's also a way to see if you understand someone's emotions or help people recognize their own emotions as well during the negotiation or persuasion process.
所以这个部分我们就叫做它为情感的标签，你帮人家贴那个感情或情感的标签。So there's two different ways in terms of labeling. There's the negative labeling or the positive labeling. But they all start the same way, which is it seems like you are happy, or it seems like you are upset, or it looks like, it feels like, it sounds like.
Right. And the key here is by using the phrasing, it seems like, or it looks like, you're removing yourself from the picture. If you go as like, I think what you're saying is, or what I hear you're saying is, Chris Voss says that you're inserting yourself into this problem. It's your opinion or it's your thought process. But by using something more neutral and saying, it seems like you're happy about that, or it seems like you're excited about this thing, then it's more about the person, again, going back into clarifying, oh, yeah, what makes me excited is this. Or in the case of negative or labeling negatives, it seems like you're a bit disappointed. They'll clarify because it might be as like, oh, yeah, well, the reason is this thing. Or, oh, I'm not really disappointed. I'm more like confused.
所以在心理学的部分，他觉得这一点还非常的有用，因为很有趣的是，当你在 label 人家的 negative 的 emotion，for example upset, confused, or angry, or hesitating， 这些比较 negative 的 emotion， 当你 label 出来 it seems like you're upset， 通常另外一方就开始去解释 oh, you know, I'm not really upset, I just feel like this could be better， 这个时候他的那个 negative 的 emotion 会被 deactivated，所以这个蛮有趣，而且这个是比较心理学的部分。So if you're kind of labeling that negative that negative emotion, that tends to deactivate， 会让他们的那个 negative 的 emotion 降低。那 So on the other hand, if you're doing this on the positive way, like, oh, it looks like you're happy about this deal， 你其实会让他这个 happy 的 emotion 跟这个 positive emotion 更强烈。
For example, when the positive labeling and strengthening the positive emotion, if someone's talking about like, oh, I want to improve this because I really care about what my customers think, or I really care about the quality of life of my customers, and then be like, it sounds like you're really passionate about how you treat your customers.
Yeah.
And it gets them really motivated and excited so that when you actually start to introduce maybe your company or your sales technique, they're already in a state that's like, yeah, I believe in this so much.
So again, you know, you're leading this conversation with your ears, not so much with your mouth, because you're really acting as a listener here.
And this comes down to one of the key secrets of persuasion, which is it's about finding the things that they really care about or they're really passionate about that and connecting it to your own purpose. So I don't need to convince you to follow my ideas. I just find out what you really care about and then I connect that back to what I want to get done.
所以刚刚 Nick 讲真的非常正确，在非常多 negotiation 成功 negotiation， 其实你会发现他是利用对方的需求，他真的心里最 passion 的是什么？因为在 negotiation 的一刚开始。他可能并不会讲 right? It's not something that you would reveal right away. You know, what you're truly passionate about, I probably wouldn't say it. I don't think it's necessary. But if you kind of dig out from me, you know, peeling off layer by layer, then you'll know exactly what the other side really truly loved and interested and passionate about.
And this is also true about people's concerns. If you're like, what are your concerns? Most people will not outright tell you the concerns that they have. But by using this mirroring and then into labeling, you can get them to start talking and clarifying the real doubts. For example, you know, people talk about, oh, it's too expensive. But a lot of times we spend money on things that are way more expensive than that. Our concern is about the value we find in that. And so by peeling off those layers and getting to that core value, what's really bothering them is when you can really start to get the negotiation going forward.
All right, so here comes the last one, which Chris Voss called it a calibrated questions. And calibrated questions really trying to allow people to sense the control and allow people to really collaborate. So basically, 基本上来讲，这个部分的 technique 也就是在问人家问题的时候，尽量不要用 why。当你讲 why 的时候，通常你会让人家觉得，诶，你好像在 question 他的一个 决定，比如说 Why are you doing this? Why do you think this is important? 你用 why 其实很多人那个心中的那个武器马上就会拿起来 right? They start defending themselves.
Right.
So instead of saying why, you really should change it to what or how questions.
By using what and how, it sounds more collaborative instead of why, which is you either do it my way or your way. It seems very controversial. If I was going to ask you the question, why do you think this is important? It's a legitimate question. It sounds okay, but it can come across as like, well, why is that important to you? But if you just simply change it to, what is the importance of doing this? Another example would be like, why do you want to raise the price? If I change that to, what is the goal of raising this price?
So then, someone else would just be like, well, my goal is to really, allow that we have more profit, which leads to blah, blah, blah. So they would actually ended up explaining more where they're coming from and not trying to defend themselves. 因为那个其实Chris Voss 这个部分他很想要陈述的就是说，当你挑起人家那种 defensive 的那种 emotion， 其实这个是在 negotiation 上面最危险的一部分。It's probably very dangerous to kind of trigger that defensive mode, right?
Right. And you'll notice a lot of times when phrasing a why question, it comes around, why do you? Which is, again, I'm assigning blame or I'm assigning a side. But when you rephrase it using what or how, it often comes, the focus of that question becomes different. What is the goal of raising the price? So I'm looking for a clarification, but I'm not assigning responsibility or blame on one side or the other.
I see. And here are some really nice questions, actually. What and how questions. When it comes to any kind of situation, right? Negotiation, discussion, that we can all use these kind of questions.
So some of Voss's favorite questions that he calls his calibrated questions would be things like this. What about this is important to you? How can I help to make this better for us? How would you like me to proceed? How can we solve this problem? Now, if you notice in his calibrated questions, it always comes across very collaborative. He uses a lot of we,
and us.
A lot of us, as opposed to you and me. But if he does use something about me, it's actually in a way that's like, how can I help you? Not what can you do for me, but how can I help you with this problem? What can I do to proceed?
Alright, 我们今天真的是分享了非常多的 information 给大家。那我很希望大家真的能够用这些不同的句子、不同的方式、不同的工具，在你的生活当中或在你的职场当中。
So we hope you enjoyed part 1 of our persuasion series, and you'll join us in the next episode as we continue.
All right, I'll talk to you guys later.
See you next time.
Bye.
Bye.
如果你喜欢我们的 podcast， 欢迎来追踪我们的主管英文 Executive Plus 的 Facebook。那也可以写信到我们的信箱 yourcareerplus@gmail.com。